Hi everyone, can you hear me right?
Yes.
All right. So I assume all the other people are currently watching the World Chess Championship. That's what I would be doing too if I wasn't teaching. But still, we have one last week of work for class. So just before starting, two things. So some people ask me about the possibility of taking a deferred exam. So if you want, just email me. I'll send you the information on what you have to do. And also about the mock final exam. So yes, this is going to be available quite soon. And as soon as it's available, I'm going to let you know. So don't worry about this. There's going to be a mock final exam.
Sir,
Yeah.
I wasn't here last class, but did you mention the final exam day?
Yes. So didn't I share this with you?
It's the 12th of December at it's about 2 o'clock, I think.
Yeah. So 2 to 4:30. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Other questions before we start? Okay, so now let's make sure that we're all on the same page.
Professor,
Yeah.
there's a question in the chat.
Yeah, that's what I'm checking.
Sir,
Yeah.
is the exam 11th or 12th?
Yeah, that's what I'm. Let me go back to my.
On the course outline, it's written that the exam is the 11th.
Yeah, I think it's the 11th.
And the last lab is the 12th.
Yeah, it's later. Yeah, but it doesn't mean you cannot do it before. Okay, econ 1. Yeah, it's the 11th. So probably the person switched the 12th of December to the 12th of, yeah. All right, so it's the 11th from 2 to 4:30. Yeah. So take a note of this. All right, so so I'm just going to tell you what we're going to see for this week. So we finish chapter 32 and 33. And so it's all about trade. So that's a fun topic. We've discussed the main theory about trade, which came from David Ricardo, who said basically that people trade when somebody has some advantage compared to the other, but it doesn't have to be an absolute advantage. It can be a comparative advantage. As long as we're not the same, then one can focus on what he or she does best, and then everybody can benefit by then trading the extra production. This phenomenon isn't exclusive to countries. That's the whole basis of market economies. So I'm a fisherman, so I fish more than I need for myself, and I train my fish for something else. So it's exactly the same idea at the country level. All right, so and now we're going to continue with the other gains from trade. sure I'm the right thing there. Yeah, I think I am. Okay, so gain from trade. All right, so two other aspects, two other ways in which a country can gain from trade. So one is for smaller countries. So what's up with smaller countries? Well, since they have a small market, even if they had a very good technology, then they only have a very small market to supply, so they cannot produce all that much. So they cannot have a huge factory that will produce 10,000 units if at most the market is going to buy 1,000. But if we have trade at the international level, then they can have a huge factory and export all of the extra production to other countries. So that's a gain for themselves as well. Similarly, there's another way, it's the fact that once you start producing more and more and more of the same, then you become better and better and better at it. So this is what we call learning by doing. So these are the two things. So economies of scale. So in industry with significant economies of scale, small countries that do not trade will have low levels of output and high costs, but smaller economies are able to. And so back in the days, you would need to be a large country like Canada or the US or Russia to be able to take advantage of a large market. But now with trade, then it doesn't matter anymore. So you could be a small country, a small European country like Switzerland or Iceland or yeah, many small nations that are actually extremely rich, that or Singapore that has lots of that. It's just basically a city, but still they're extremely well off in Asia. So one example of and it's not just for country wide. So you could decide that we're going to focus on some industry and make a good profit out of it. So one example at the city levels, so Montreal, focus on heavily on video game industry or computer. In recent years, or so that's a good example. Or back in the days, you had at the end of the 19th century. Let's just say 19th century. Vietnam focused on latex production. So I'm giving this example. It's to say that it doesn't have to be beneficial for the country. In that case, obviously, at that time, Vietnam was a colony and a large, so I think France used to be in charge. And then the US and other took over, but back then I think it was a French colony. And what happened is they said, "Oh well, Vietnam, you have cheap labor, so we're going to send a lot of latex trees, and we're going to make money and with your cheap labor." But that was almost like slavery or very poor working condition for them. But that made sense. That's the whole country focused on that thing, and it made a lot of money for people who owned the plantations. So comment here is small country. Trade. by the way, the Vietnam story, Kim Thuy wrote about this in her book M. So it's a nice little book, and it talks about how difficult production and latex plantations was. Yeah. So learning by doing. So by learning by doing, you're able to accumulate experience and become better and better. So at the plant level, that's a big example of this. Henry Ford's production line. So instead of one worker working on the whole car, so they said, okay, you're going to be specialized in screwing this bolt. And then that person, it's very, very boring to do that, but that person becomes the foremost expert in screwing that bolt on the production line in Henry Ford's, yeah. So that's what we mean by production by doing, learning by doing. And it leads to, yeah. So learning by doing, yeah. More experience. Equal seniority. Higher. So these are the two effects that we can see together. So the learning by doing is the fact that for what, so this again is output. So that's, it would be Q here, and this would be $. So this is the long run average cost. And the fact that it goes down is the reflection that if you focus on the same thing, then for every level of output, you will be more productive. But also there is the fact that if I'm a very small country, I'm at Q0 here, I can just produce a smaller production. But then if I'm able to actually focus on this and export, then I can increase my production, and by increasing my production, it again decreases my my overall costs. So then you can have, by focusing on trade, you can have both of these effects and move from A to B prime. Yeah, so that's a very advantageous case for very advantageous for small countries. In Europe, you will see that they're extremely open to trade. Basically, Europe has become one big country. Well, with the UK leaving now, it's not that clear, but market-wise, before the EU was sort of federalized or become very integrated, so it was basically a trade union. It was a bunch of countries that decided, let's have lower barriers to trade and become rich by trading amongst each other. So each country can focus on their comparative advantage, for instance. All right. Another very important source of comparative advantage is different endowments. So if you may remember, so David Rickard. So this is what we've seen in the last class. So the general idea. Oops. So some countries have comparative so different technologies basically, or different production cost, but we don't say why. And one source of this comparative advantage is different factor endowment. So this was developed by Exer and Olin. I think they're Swedish, Scandinavian for sure, but I can't remember exactly which country. So I think Swedish. And so the following, the idea is the following. So if my country is endowed with this type of resource, then I should produce the goods that cost little to produce with this type of resource. So, and then export them. So nowadays, nowadays, not that important, because we have so much trade in recent natural resources. So, it's not like you're going to say, oh, I have some minerals in my country, I'm going to produce whatever is useful with this mineral. No, it's very easy to just ship this mineral elsewhere. One of the inputs still cannot be traded efficiently or easily. Do you have an idea what?
Someone in the chat said water.
Water. Yeah, that's true. But so would you say, so Canada, for instance, has a lot of fresh water. But what industry would you think that Canada would be so good at developing? Maybe fishing. Fishing for trout. But yeah, no, I'm thinking about something else. But yeah, it's true that fresh water cannot be traded very easily.
Is it oil?
What?
Oil.
Oil. No, oil can be traded quite easily, right? You have oil tankers that go everywhere and pipelines.
What about weapons?
Electricity?
Electricity. Electricity, that is a very good one. So yeah, okay, this may be related to water though. Is so incarnations of this today. Cheap electricity. So then what you can develop is sectors that need a lot of electricity to work. So then it makes sense to have them in your country. So I think aluminum may be one, which gives a good advantage for Rio Tinto Altran. Yeah, so, but yeah, I wouldn't bet my life on it. I'm not, I think it is, but so one very modern incarnation of this is Bitcoin mining. So Bitcoin mining, it doesn't make sense to send this to a place where electricity is super expensive, because Bitcoin mining requires so much electricity. So goals where electricity is cheap. And what other very good aspect of some country may be good from Bitcoin mining?
Could you repeat the question, please?
So Bitcoin mining, where does it go? Because Bitcoin mining can occur anywhere in the world. So one aspect is where, so it makes sense for it to go where electricity is cheap. And there's another aspect to that.
It's cold.
Yes, where it is cold. So now a lot of it has went to Russia. Yeah, I'm not commenting what I think about Bitcoin mining. I'm just commenting that the fact that this is something that can go anywhere, and it's going to go where it's advantageous for it to go. But that's not and it's linked to climate, of course. But that's not the resource
Why
I was
does it need to be cold?
Oh, because you need to cool down your computers. Yes, because it's so if you're so for you, some of you who don't know, Bitcoin mining is you have to solve some hash problem to mine some blocks to allow transaction to occur on the blockchain. I don't know a lot about it, but the thing is, anytime you have your fan going on your computer, then it's because your computer works too hard and it has to slow down to cool down the CPU, otherwise it's going to melt. So if you are doing a lot of computation, then it becomes very hot. So you need your computers to be at some place where it's cold. So right now in Canada, it would be very good for Bitcoin because it's one, there is cheap electricity, and two, it becomes very cold in January. So, yeah, but I was thinking about some other factor, other important factor. Cheap labor. So this is what, yeah, that was the comparative advantage. Of China and other Asian. But now that wages are, yeah. So I'm going to say in the 1990s, early 2000. Why? Well, because now in China, what happened? They learned by doing. So they expanded a lot their industry. People got good at what they were doing, and now wages have gone up a lot. That's the whole driving force behind the Chinese middle class. So it's not true anymore that you just go to China and it's going to be very cheap to produce what you want to produce. There are many more countries now where it's actually even cheaper to produce there. Oh, yeah, was it there? Corruption, yeah, corruption might be good for Bitcoin actually, because what is very good is if you can get some deal with some local officials to get cheap electricity, and yeah, it helps if they're corrupt. So yeah, this would be part of it. Right, human capital. So people, source of comparative advantage. So people can acquire skills, human capital, and influence countries' comparative advantage. So yeah, invest in education. So this is going to attract very good industries. If comparative advantage can be acquired, can also be lost. So one example of this is again Montreal. So used to have pharmaceutical industries there. But at some point, they decided to stop encouraging them. I think they were giving them maybe tax breaks and stuff. So yeah, they left. Yeah, so maybe we could have developed a vaccine in Montreal, like Pfizer, with Pfizer or Moderna, if we had tried to keep these industries here. But yeah, it's always a gamble. You know, should you invest with your public policy into keeping good jobs here, but then you need to give them tax breaks, and there's this competition, harsh competition between different cities to bring good industries. And in the end, yeah, it costs a lot of money to do that too. So nowadays, people are asking themselves, so is it true that you need natural endowment to get trade or to understand how trade works? Well, that's something that the book doesn't talk a lot about, but that's super important, is what we call new trade theory. That's developed by Paul Krugman. So he got the Nobel Prize for that. And basically, the idea is the following. So you may remember monopolistic competition. So monopolistic competition was a sort of market in which everybody develops a brand, and you try to be your own small monopoly in your brand. But the problem is that you don't have. It's not something that it's not an advantage that is super strong for you, because yeah, I may try to convince consumers that my brand of cereal is so great, but they might, if I charge them too high, they move away. But still, new trade theory says that if you have monopolistic competition, there's a gain from varieties. Varieties. Is that called varieties? Yes. So what do we want to explain here? We want to explain the fact that most of the trade now occurs within sector between countries that look alike. So for instance, why would you have so countries like France and Germany trade cars? So if you think about comparative advantage, you should imagine, okay, so one of the two is going to produce cars and the other is going to produce something else. So France is going to produce cheese, and France cheese is going to be exported to Germany, and German cars are going to be exported to France. But that's not what you observe. You observe that France exports cars to Germany and Germany exports cars to France. Why is that? Well, it's because with monopolistic competition, you get a gain from varieties, but developing a new variety costs money. So you need large market to justify it. So with trade, we can sell varieties in many countries. And so this is probably the main driver of trade now. It's not the fact that I produce cheese and you export it to you, you produce car, you export it for me. It's the fact that I produce my own national variety of cheese, of cars, of many different things, and I send them to you, you send them to me, and we're all happy to have different flavors or different brands from many different countries. Some people are going to be fan of, or wine, for instance. Some people are going to be fan of French wine, Spanish wine, South African wine, Australian wine. So they're all they all satisfy some small share of the whole wine market around the world. So this is this is probably the most important aspect of trade. All right, so now let's go in with more detail about trade patterns. So law of one price, what is it? It simply states that if we trade, then the price should be the same in both countries if I'm able to sell my object that I just produced in country A or country B, taking in account the fact that that you have to transport it. So if there's some transport cost, then it's going to add to the cost of the good, but transport costs are always going down, so it's not like it's a big aspect of trade. Yeah. Now, what happens if you export? So this is the demand for the local demand by local consumers. This is the local supply by local consumers. And if suddenly you open to trade, what this means essentially is that the market price at the international level is here higher than the equilibrium price in your own country. So that for suppliers, it makes sense to, rather than sell at this low PD price, to sell at the PW. So PW is P world, so the price of the world. So they make more money. So yeah, this is interesting, but I'd rather we just move on to the next graph and study it more, because this is how we look at classically at trade is with imports rather than exports, but it's basically the same idea. So let's go ahead and do that. All right. So, and I'm going to zoom in a bit. All right. So what's going on there? So without imports, so without trade, we have local supply, local demand. So imagine that's Canada, and that's some manufactured good that's easy to be manufactured elsewhere. And then Canada opens to trade. So what happens? Well, so the only reason that why we would open to trade is if it's actually cheaper to import the goods rather than produce them locally. And here what we assume, of course, is that the good that we're talking about is uniform. It's the same. So there's not like, oh, I want to buy Canadian because the Canadian brand is better. No, now it's just exactly the same. And so what do you observe? Well, this is what happens without trade. And then with trade, consumers, are they happier or less happy with open if you open to trade? So I'm going to state again my question. So imagine you're at equilibrium here. So this is the local price, PD, P domestic, I think, and the quantity domestic is here. And if I open to international trade, then consumers are able to buy whatever quantity they like, as long as they pay the world price, PW. So who gains and who loses from the trade?
The people that are trading are losing, the consumers are gaining because they pay.
Exactly, perfect. So what happens is openness, you open to trade. So the price goes down. consumers gain. Producers lose. What is being traded actually? Well, you see that for these units there, the supply is, I remind you, marginal cost. So for these units, it so happens that it's the marginal cost of producing them locally is lower than their international price. So all these units up to Q1 are going to be produced locally because the supply is below international price. But then with our trade, we would have produced these units locally too. But here it so happens that that it's cheaper to import them. And actually, as you can see, we don't stop here. We can, so the consumers want to buy as long as the demand is the willingness to pay is higher than the international price. So they're going to buy up to that point here. So this whole quantity there is going to be imports. All right. And question, so can we see what is going to happen to each person's surplus? Yes. So the surplus of the producers before import, the opening to trade was this whole triangle there. And now they are not able to sell at the high local price. They have to sell at this low international price. So they lose all this, this income coming from the high price. They also lose from not being able to sell as much as before, because now these imports, say they come from China, for instance. So this is all the lost surplus of the producers.
So is it also the consumer surplus then?
So imagine this is A.
Sir?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it the consumer surplus too? Or
yes. So I'm going. So you said that, and I just thought, okay, I am going to need to switch my my notation. So producers lose this region A there. And what do consumer gain? Well, the consumers, this is all extra gain for consumers, because instead of paying a high price, they pay a low price, but they also gain all these extra units that they also buy at a low price. So let's add this extra, yeah, there. So let's say this is B. So consumers win A plus B. So it looks like opening to trade leads to is beneficial as a whole. Why? Because the gain from consumers A plus B are larger than the loss for the local producers, which are just A. So when you hear things like, oh, we should protect the Canadian industry, or we should protect Canada against unfair competition or unfair advantage from other countries. So what do people mean by this? Well, it depends on whose shoes you are. So what this really means is, oh, we have to protect local manufacturers against the low price of Walmart imported goods that actually make a lot of consumers happy. So that's the thing. It's if consumers still bought Canadian goods, then it wouldn't change anything. The problem is that producers are unhappy and consumers are happy. And what happens though is that usually the losses of producers are are very narrow or for a few people, and these people have a big incentive of going to the government and saying, oh, please protect us, we are hurting. So yeah, for the government, usually they're going to say, okay, we're going to help you. Whereas the consumers, well, they're happy with lower prices in general, but it's not like they are going to band together to ask the government to increase trade. So usually there's this political game going on, and you really have to resist as a government and say, no, no, no. Yeah, so trade is good, so we should open to trade. So. It's B. And if we go back to the previous slide, then you can do the same analysis and show that here producers are going to gain more than consumers. Consumers have to pay a higher price, but the gains from the producers outweigh the loss for the consumers. So I'm not going to do it, but I invite you to do it if you want.
I have a question about the last slide. How come the producer lose if it is cheaper to import than to produce it?
How come the producers lose is if what?
If because we mentioned that it is cheaper to import than to produce it, so someone has to take the decision to import, but isn't it the producer who decides it, or?
So the producers, they just produce their own thing. So imagine I produce my bicycles, and I'm kind of okay producer at producing bicycles, but my bicycles are $1,000, and then there are cheap imports from China. So that are only $500. So consumers are and they're exactly the same. So everybody is going to want to pay at most $500 for their bicycle. And as a producer of expensive bicycle, I'm going to lose all my market share and my income, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but okay, what?
Okay, well, think about your question. If you, yeah, we can go back to it. Anyways, the next chapter is again a discussion about trade policy. So this is going to come back. Yeah. So is comparative advantage obsolete? So I've talked a bit about this. So the other aspect of it is modern supply chains. So it may look like China, for instance, is producing a lot of stuff. So yeah. But oftentimes they are assembling parts produced elsewhere for foreign companies, for Western companies, for instance, which were designed as elsewhere. So this is all the complicated aspect of modern trade. So if you say, oh, I'm going to block imports of some good that's produced in China, yeah, but maybe the parts that were used to produce this good were actually produced in Canada. So by blocking imports from China, you're actually blocking the output of Canadian firms. So it makes things super complicated, and it makes it very difficult actually to have trade barriers, because you never know what sort of unintended consequences you're going to produce by doing this. So this is the whole problem of modern supply chains. It's the fact that now the trade is so integrated. And by the way, with COVID, so people are starting to think, oh, maybe we're too much integrated, because now we're dependent on China to supply masks, for instance. But yeah, this is I don't think it's going to go away. So modern supply chains are really, really complex, and the complexity is there to stay. All right. Last aspect, terms of trade. What is the term of trade? It's the ratio of the average price of a country's exports to imports. So it determines how much money you're going to make on by trading. And usually you want the highest possible term of trade, because it means that your exports are expensive and your imports are cheap. So you're well off. You can make a lot of money by trading. And on the other hand, if exported good, the price falls, then you cannot import as much, so you become poor. So this is what it looks like. So imagine so here so I specializing in wheat. But then the question is, what is the price of wheat internationally? So yeah, this is my specialization I produce here. But then what am I going to be able to import thanks to this production? Well, it all depends on the international price of wheat. So if the price is not that good, so I'm only going to be able to consume at A. But if the price of wheat increases in the world and the price of the imports like cloth decrease, then this is going to shift up the consumption possibilities to B. So I'm going to be richer, essentially. So just before continuing, a small quiz. What do you think is important for Canada's terms of trade?
Oil and wheat?
Yes, oil, exactly.
Can you say for Quebec?
For Quebec?
No, I said, can you say,
yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, could we say that for Quebec, an important thing is like the expertise we have here for building dams?
Oh, yeah. So I wouldn't say that it's such a amazingly large part of what we export. Yeah, like SNC-Lavalin, for instance. Yeah, that's part of it, but it's a small part. So for Quebec, yeah, another part of it would be the price of electricity in the southern United States. So if the price there goes up, then we can make a lot of money with Hydro-Quebec by exporting our cheap electricity. Yeah, but for Canada as a whole, it really is. So, oh, by the way, so this is just to say that since it's this is an example with one export wheat and one import cloth, but in real life we have many exports and imports. So this is a weighted average of the price of all our exports divided by the weighted average of the price of all our imports multiplied by 100. Yeah, so it defines how favorable a trade is. And here's the Canada's terms of trade. And as I told you, it should be influenced by the price of natural resources that are exported by Canada, because Canada's big export is natural resources. And to prove you this is the case, so here is the price of oil. And yeah, I'm going to make this a bit smaller. Superimpose this. And you see how it matches so well. Well, not perfectly, but it's amazing how it matches. So it's really apparent that when the price of oil goes down, say in 2009 or in 2015, then the terms of trade for Canada are declined a lot, because that's our main export internationally. So I'm just going to keep it here. So. Right. So I think that's the last line. Yeah. So that's the finish with this chapter. Just a second. Right. So questions on this chapter? Comments? Yeah, so terms of trade is yeah, how wealthy you are on the international stage. Yes.
Could you go back to the slide 24 and could you re-explain the graph?
All right. So I can produce cloth and wheat, but I decide to specialize in wheat production. So it means that I could choose whatever production to produce on this purple line. I'm going to put all my basket into wheat production, because I know that I have some comparative advantage in wheat. But this is not, it doesn't tell me, so all I know is I have all this wheat, but do I want to just eat wheat? No, I would like to consume many different things and cloth especially. Problem is I have to trade it with somebody. So, and how favorable, how much cloth I'm going to be able to import as a country is determined by the price of cloth compared to the price of wheat. If the price of wheat internationally goes up, then it means that I'm able to import a lot of cloth in exchange for my wheat. So, so it means that the terms of trade are going to be T1 here. Whereas if the price of cloth isn't that all that good, then it's just going to be T0. And the worst case scenario is if the international price of wheat compared to cloth is exactly the same as in Canada or in the country I'm looking at. In that case, then I specialized in producing wheat, but anyways, I'm going to trade it exactly the same price as if it would have cost me internally to produce it. So yeah, the best case scenario is T1, and T1 allows me to choose my consumption is in on this blue line here.
All right, thank you.
All right. So in the remaining time, let's start the next chapter and last chapter. trade policy. So I think it should be quite easy because we have already discussed a lot about it. So let me share the screen.
I just have a question about the last page of the last chapter. You said when the price goes down, the term of trade, it varies depending on the price, but the price of what?
What you export.
Okay, thank you. So when the price of what you export goes down, so the term of trade declines. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, exactly. So for instance, if I'm Canada, I concentrate on oil production and I trade it in exchange for, say, imports from China. But if the international price of oil goes up, then the terms of trade are better for Canada, and I'm able to buy more Chinese goods in exchange for my oil. So that's the thing is, so economists, we are not really interested in money or whatever. In the end, what we care about is what goods can I consume, and we care about utility. So what matters is what is the relative price of oil with respect to Chinese goods. So then I can know if I export 10 tons of oil, how much imports from China can I get? And this is how rich I'm going to get. So, yeah. All right, last chapter, chapter 33. So should we have free trade? Should we protect our national industries? And how do countries protect? So as you may know, there has been since World War II a steady push towards liberalizing trade at the international level. It's not accomplished in every sector. So some sectors are still extremely well regulated and protected, like the agricultural sector. Yeah, and there has been some backlash in the last few years, especially with Trump's trade war with China that didn't go so well. So we might discuss a bit about this. All right. So I'm happy that I showed the previous slide because you understand. So the graph where we show the gain from trade. Because this makes more sense, I think. So most governments accept the position that relatively free flow of international trade is desirable. So this was not always the case. So back in the days, before Adam Smith and the modern type of thinking, there was one sort of thinking that was popular was mercantilism. So somebody know what mercantilism is?
Isn't it when a country has colonies and pretty much just takes the resources from those colonies, produces a good and sells them back at a higher price?
Yeah, it's linked to this. Yeah, mercantilism is a big thing. So let me, there's somebody there. Yeah, one wins and one loses. So that's, let me say briefly what I was meaning by this. So before. So mercantilism. So that what is important with mercantilism is I export, you give me gold. And I don't import. so I don't lose my gold. I use my gold to pay soldiers. I invade you. This is a very simplified version of what the idea was, but the idea was, so people were realizing, oh, the way to accumulate precious metal, which I use to pay my army, is to export goods to as many people as possible. So they were making sure that it was extremely difficult to import goods. And until then, after Adam Smith, we realize that trade make everybody better off. Yeah, let's just say almost everybody, except if you're hurt by the imports. So this is it was a total shift in the way of thinking. So yeah, about the colonies. So yeah, you could say that the goal of having colonies was to again go and extract gold and silver from the mines in the colonies. So then the question is, should a country permit completely free trade flow, or should we use some policy to have barriers to trade? And if we cannot have tariffs, because tariffs have been more or less ruled out, then we can have other ways of restricting trade. So what's a tariff? A tariff is a tax applied to imports and goods and services. So it's just like a tax. It's just, instead of taxing local production and consumption, you tax imports. And as we've seen, if imports hurt producers, so are producers going to like or dislike tariffs?
I would say it depends. For example, a local producer in Canada, if he only sells within Canada, he'd be happy about tariffs because then there's less competition from foreign competition from abroad.
Yeah.
But say a multinational, he would want like as little tariffs as possible because he trades on a global scale. Yeah,
exactly. So tariffs. So that's an even better answer than what I would have said. So favored by local producers who are by international trade or competition, but not popular for large multinational corporation or even local or that need the imports as production inputs. Yeah, so if you're not, if the imports are not competing against your product, but if you're somebody who's going to buy the imports to produce, then you don't want restrictions, you don't want tariffs. So it's most of the time you're going to find that more people don't want tariffs than want tariffs. But yeah, as I was saying, sometimes you have pressure groups that say, no, but put tariffs, please. I'm hurt by imports. And they can lobby the government to go in their favor. Yeah, so example of, so that's tariffs. Example of non-tariff barriers are import quotas, custom procedures that are deliberately cumbersome. So if you say, oh, it's free to import to Canada, it just takes you, it takes 2 days for us to inspect your truck or your boat, then it's so costly for you that it's exactly the same as paying a tariff. So what you want is efficient trade. So that's why the European Union worked so well, is that you just don't check borders anymore. You just allow goods to move freely over everybody's borders. And it's when you start again having national borders that things get complicated.
Sir,
yeah.
Could a medieval example of a non-tariff barrier be robber barons?
Robber barons.
They were knights who would extort any passing merchants, or like kidnap them to sell them, to ransom them.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say it's a. I would say it's a cost of trade, right? So it's I know I want to export some goods to this region that's troublesome. So I have to take into account the fact that part of my exports is going to be captured by these robber barons, for instance, or marauding bands, or so. Or you could also have the another more modern aspect of it is corruption. If you need to pay bribes, then that's just part of the trade to do it. And by the way, so SNC-Lavalin has been. So for the people who don't know, SNC-Lavalin is a big Canadian, one of the biggest Canadian engineering firm that was export a lot of their know-how to produce large projects around the world. But oftentimes they realize, oh, we want to make a project somewhere, but we know there's a lot of corruption, so we have to pay local officials, and it's against the law to pay bribes to do that. You shouldn't pay bribes because it's illegal, but oftentimes they just say, yeah, if I want to trade there, that's just the price of doing trade. In Russia, for instance, you have to pay lots of bribes to local officials if you want to get things done. Yeah, so that's a part of some sort of, yeah, you could say it's barrier, but it's barrier would be something more of something that a national government would do. All right, so this is what we've been talking about last chapter. So free trade encourages all countries to specialize in what they have comparative advantage. So then if we do, we have better living standards. So free trade makes the country as a whole better off, even though it may make it may not make every individual in the country better off. So consumers are usually happy, but some producers and this is the whole thing that's going on. And so, yeah, I don't know if I should talk about it now or later. Yeah, okay, no, I'm going to wait until later to talk about it. So a country engages in protection to interfere with free trade. Several valid arguments for production. I think they might wanted to say protection. Yeah, I think that's a typo. I think it doesn't make sense. So let's just say they wanted to write protection. So one is promoting diversification. So why? Well, because if you engage too much in trade and you have like one big export, things go well when the export is expensive in the world, but then things can go south very quickly if the terms of trade turned in not in your favor. So example is Venezuela. So they were very rich when oil prices were high. But after 2015, the shale oil revolution around the world, then the price of oil dropped, and the country is in big trouble. Is without income. And as you can see, as you know, things are going very bad in Venezuela. So that would be a case in which it would have actually been better to try to diversify the economy and produce many things locally. So in case things don't go well with oil, at least you have something to fall back on. Now it's just horrible how bad things are in Venezuela. Yeah. Protecting specific group. So this is what I was talking about. So there are some so in the WTO rules. So trade barriers are forbidden. Except temporarily to help sectors, local sectors in decline. So this is something that you may do. You may say, well, my local industry is hurting, so I'm going to put some barriers temporarily just to help them like temporarily find other jobs or do something else. But it's not being used all that often. Yeah, so yeah, so is that yeah, and terms of trade too can be help, but mostly for larger countries. Small countries cannot. All right, so it's 10 o'clock. So if there are questions, go ahead. Otherwise, we can stop here and continue next time.
At the beginning of the class, you said that we can email you if you want to have access to what, like a practice exam, or
no practice exam. I'm going to share it with everybody when it's available. So I said if you want to take a deferred exam.
Okay, thank you. And you're gonna share it on Moodle, the practice.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Professor,
Yeah.
I know usually you post the annotated slides in the recordings after, like before next class. For chapter 32, could you post it after this class, please?
Yeah, well, that's what I intend to do because we are done with chapter 32. So
All right. Oh, thank you.
no problem.
Sir, I think next Tuesday we will have class because it's the makeup day for like the Monday class we've missed. So I think we won't have class, and I'm not sure.
Oh, what are you saying? So do we have class on Thursday at least?
On Tuesdays we have class in the morning, but we have the makeup day for Monday on next Tuesday, so the 7th of December. And I think we won't have class then. And I'm not sure.
So you're saying we have class next Tuesday?
I'm asking if we will have class.
Well, well, okay, I will check that.
Because I think we're not supposed to have class next Tuesday.
Yeah, no. So what I thought is we were done after this Thursday. Man, now I'm okay. Maybe I didn't note things properly. I'm going to verify if that's the case.
On my calendar on the Concordia app, it says that Thursday from this week is a normal Thursday.
Say that again.
Well, when I go on the Concordia app and I look at my calendar, it shows me that next Thursday is a normal Thursday with class.
Not Thursday, Tuesday, like Tuesday, not Thursday.
Yeah, next week I don't have anything.
No. See, I thought Thursday. So in 2 days was our last class, but so now I'm doubting myself. So I'm just going to make sure this is the case, so I don't miss a class. So and I'll tell you. So there's last Thursday. I'm almost entirely sure of that. So whatever, if we have an extra class, I'm going to let you know. How about that?
And do you know when the practice exam will be available?
No, but quite soon, I think.
Okay, thank you.
In what format is the final? It's the same as the midterms, the multiple choice on Moodle, or is it on a different website? And
yeah, it's the same format.
And it's going to be like in the same place as well.
Yeah, on Moodle. Yeah.
Okay, so nothing is changing other than the fact that it's worth more than our normal.
Yeah, exactly, and you have more time. So.
Oh, okay, awesome. I'm taking the alternate as well, which is on the 12th at like 9 in the morning. Like I already signed up for it.
Okay.
And they said yes. So thank you.
So thanks.
How would you sign up for the alternate exam, or do we just email you, sir?
It's too late. They said no. You were supposed to do it on like the student portal.
Okay.
And then you were supposed to like check if you had any, what do you call it? Any like two exams at the same time, or like religious stuff. So you got to like just click it, but when I go to the portal now, it says not allowed.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Could we meet quickly after this class ends?
Yeah, sure.
All right, thank you.
No other question? Okay, so have a nice day, everybody, and I see you Thursday.